Thousands and thousands of people get into real estate every single year with the ambition of making it big. Unfortunately, most underestimate what it takes to get the success that they're after, and they end up leaving the business just a year or two after they start. And in many cases, this is due to our biggest enemy of our potential. That is our ego. And so here's how that ego shows up and what we have to make sure that we protect against. So before we jump into the 6 ways ego shows up in your business of real estate sales, if you're watching this, you're a real estate agent, you're not happy with where you're at in your business right now, and you're looking to build a listing-based business where you can generate a multiple 6-figure income, and you're open to a coaching relationship where you're willing to be held accountable, you don't have a massive ego, and you're coachable, I'm going to put a link right underneath this video. And when the time is right, feel free to click it. You can schedule some time to talk with us. You can learn about our Listing Agent Academy and then decide if working with us right now makes any sense or not. Number 1, cognitive dissonance. And so one of the ways ego shows up is when we get into real estate, we have this uninformed optimism. You see, we have these massive, massive goals. Somehow we say, okay, we're going to come out of this world where maybe you're making $50,000 a year. And now that you're in real estate with this unlimited income potential, you have this goal of $250,000, $300,000, $500,000, $1 million a year you want to make. That's fine. The problem is this: the way ego shows up is through cognitive dissonance. Having the big goal is one thing, but do your actions and your behavior align with the goal? And that's what we see as the biggest issue with a lot of people getting into real estate. They have the ambition. We know there's no lack of ambition of people getting into this business. That's why people get into this business. But the problem that we see all too often is a lack of effort. Their behaviors and their actions aren't close to aligning with the goals that they've set. You see, making a large income of $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 a year, whatever your goal is, if you're coming out of a world where you're making $50,000 or $60,000 or $80,000, and you have a goal to make a lot more money, it's a process of who you must become. Your actions and your behaviors must align with the goal. And most of the time, we see those things way out of alignment. Number 2, the disease of knowledge. So the second way ego shows up in a real estate agent's business is this mindset of knowing it all. Yeah, I've heard that before. Yeah, I heard somebody talk about that on a podcast. The disease of knowledge is something that happens to us where we confuse learning for doing. And there's some questions we have to ask ourselves. If you know what to do, fine. The question is not, do you know what you should be doing? The question is, are you doing it? And if you sit here and you say, yes, I'm doing it, the second question to ask is, do your results prove that you're doing it? In other words, if you know what to do and you're doing it, do your results prove that you're doing it? And then the last question is, if you say yes to that question, have you mastered it? Do you have evidence that what you're doing is actually working? In other words, does your bank account reflect that you've mastered it? Because it's real easy to say, oh yeah, I know about prospecting. Yep, I know how to do an open house. Yep, I know how to do door knocking. I know how to do internet leads. I know how to build a funnel. I know all of that. I know you know how to do it. That's not the question. Question is, are you executing on what you know? Number 3 is unwilling to be vulnerable. And what I mean by being vulnerable is the way in which ego shows up in many cases is a lot of agents avoid doing things that they're not good at, so they don't have to look stupid in front of their peers. They won't role play or practice because they don't want to be exposed. They're not willing to be in a situation where people know that they don't know, because maybe they came out of a business where they knew everything. They were the go-to person. And now they find themselves in a sales position in the first time of their life, not being the best at something, but they don't want anyone to know it. So they don't role play. They don't practice. They don't film their listing presentation. That's the last thing they want to do. They don't want to expose the fact that their listing presentation not only isn't something that is world-class, but they cannot stand the thought of being exposed, having one of their peers see them in doing something that isn't perfect. They don't make any content because I don't want to look stupid on camera. They don't make any outbound prospecting phone calls. That's beneath me. I don't want to sound dumb. They don't host any events because they have no substance to bring. They have no value to deliver. And so that's our ego getting in the way of our potential. Number 4 is something called false recognition. So here's the truth. Don't get mad. It's just the reality. The reality is more people in this business of real estate are concerned about looking successful than actually being successful. How do I know that? Well, because every time I see agents posting about all their success in real estate, and I know about their real production, in many cases, they don't line up. That you would look at most of these real estate agents on Instagram or Facebook and think they're like famous. You think they're the top producing real estate agent. Many of them are barely making it. And so they post on social media talking about, what they're going to do and about all their big goals and about all the big things that they're doing, but rarely do they do it because they get dopamine and false recognition without really achieving anything. And it's the perceived status that often tricks us into being successful when we're not, versus the reality. Because many people think to themselves, well, I can't let people know that they were right when they told me I shouldn't get into real estate, that I shouldn't quit the job, that I should have stuck it out with what I was doing before. So I can't let them in on the secret. I have to put this front up that I'm doing big things. And that's the false recognition that we're talking about. Number 5, complacency. You see, many real estate agents that experience quick success find themselves stopping the things, they stop doing the things that got them the success in the first place. Because they say, oh, I don't need to do that anymore. They forget the basics. They forget that, hey, what got you here? Why don't you double down on those things? And what happens a lot of the time is an agent will succeed through one method or another. They'll get some quick wins. They'll start to succeed. And then rather than double down on what actually works, they'll completely change everything. They'll blow all their money and start doing things completely differently that they have no experience in. They end up losing all the money, and a lot of them can't come back from that. You see, there's a great book that prompted this video called Ego is the Enemy by Ryan Holiday. And in the book, he talks about the story of Howard Hughes. There's a great movie on this with Leonardo DiCaprio. And the movie and the story is exactly what I'm talking about. Is Howard Hughes at 18 years old took over his family's business that was worth millions of dollars. He turned it into $1 billion business with their oil tool company. And like many agents, instead of doubling down and focusing on his oil bit company, he started putting his hand in a bunch of other cookie jars, chasing shiny objects. He started to get into this business and that business and this business and that business. He ended up losing everything. He ended up fighting lawsuits. It's a very, very sad story. And we see the same thing with a lot of agents. This is how ego shows up, is when we actually do succeed, oftentimes ego gets in the way and we stop doing the things that got us the success in the first place. Number 6, the victim mentality. This is another way ego shows up in our business of real estate sales. We don't want to take the blame for anything. We have this victim mentality where we want to place the blame on everything else except for us looking in the mirror. It's the broker's fault. It's the market's fault. It's the lead's fault. It's the seller's fault. It's the buyer's fault. It's everyone's fault but mine. But we know that success in real estate is simply a choice. It's up to us to make it happen. And when it's not happening, you see, what we can't do is take credit for all the wins without also taking responsibility for our losses.